Kamala Harris is a groundbreaking figure in American politics, known for being the first woman, the first black woman, and the first South Asian American to serve as Vice President of the United States. Here's a brief narrative of her life and rise to prominence. Kamala Harris, a trailblazing journey. Kamala Devi Harris was born on October 20th, 1964 in Oakland, California, to two immigrant parents, Shyamala Gopalan, a breast cancer researcher from India, and Donald Harris, a Jamaican economist. Raised in the culturally diverse Bay Area, Kamala's upbringing was deeply influenced by her mother's fierce dedication to social justice and her father's academic rigor. Kamala has often spoken about her mother's belief in the power of education and hard work, values that shaped her character and ambitions. A strong foundation in education and advocacy. Kamala excelled academically, attending Howard University, a historically black university in Washington, D.C., where she earned her undergraduate degree in political science and economics. It was at Howard that Kamala began to embrace her identity as a black woman and started to grapple with the challenges and opportunities that came with her dual cultural heritage. After Howard, she attended UC Hastings College of the Law in San Francisco, where she earned her law degree. Kamala's early career in law was shaped by her commitment to fighting for justice. She worked in the Alameda County District Attorney's Office and later as a deputy district attorney in San Francisco. Her role as a prosecutor allowed her to witness the inequities within the criminal justice system firsthand, and it set the stage for her future political career. A rising star in California politics. Kamala's political career took off when she became the district attorney of San Francisco in 2004. In this role, she worked on issues such as reforming the criminal justice system, improving the handling of sexual assault cases, and advocating for re-entry programs for former prisoners. Kamala made a name for herself as a tough, yet compassionate leader, winning high-profile cases and gaining the support of progressives and law enforcement alike. In 2010, she was elected as California's Attorney General, becoming the first woman, the first black woman, and the first South Asian American to hold the office. As Attorney General, she continued her work on criminal justice reform, consumer protection, and environmental issues. Notably, she took strong stances on issues like marriage equality, healthcare reform, and the protection of immigrant rights. She was known for challenging the Trump administration's policies on issues such as immigration and healthcare. Senator Kamala Harris, a national voice. In 2016, Kamala Harris made another leap in her political career, running for the U.S. Senate. She won the seat in a landslide victory, becoming the first South Asian and second black woman to serve in the Senate. As a senator, Harris quickly gained national attention for her sharp questioning during high-profile hearings, particularly as a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. She earned praise for her forceful, sometimes fiery, interrogations of Trump administration officials, including then Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh and Attorney General William Barr. Kamala's political platform in the Senate focused on issues like criminal justice reform, healthcare, climate change, and women's rights. She became a leading voice on policies to address systemic racism and inequality in the United States, often drawing on her own experiences as a woman of color to highlight the challenges faced by marginalized communities. The presidential campaign and joining the Biden ticket. In 2020, Kamala Harris launched a bid for the Democratic nomination for president, running on a platform of progressive policies including universal health care, climate change action, and a reformed criminal justice system. While her campaign gained early momentum, it eventually struggled to gain traction, and she dropped out in December 2019. However, Kamala's influence in the Democratic Party remained strong, and her ability to connect with voters was undeniable. Later that year, when former Vice President Joe Biden became the Democratic nominee for president, he selected Kamala Harris as his running mate. This was a historic decision. Kamala became the first woman, first black woman, and first person of South Asian descent to be nominated for vice president by a major political party in the U.S. The Biden-Harris ticket won the 2020 presidential election, defeating the incumbent, President Donald Trump, in a historic race marked by a global pandemic, a divisive political climate, and social unrest following protests against police violence. Kamala Harris was sworn in as the 49th Vice President of the United States on January 20th, 2021, alongside President Biden. Vice Presidency and continuing advocacy. As Vice President, Kamala has continued to break barriers. She is the first woman to hold the office, the first Black and South Asian American, and the first graduate of a historically Black college or university, HBCU, to ascend to such a high position. In addition to fulfilling her constitutional duties, Kamala has been a fierce advocate for issues like voting rights, reproductive rights, and climate action. Kamala has also focused on diplomacy and foreign policy, taking the lead on initiatives to address the root causes of migration from Central America, promoting U.S. interests abroad, and representing the United States at high-level international meetings. Kamala's work as Vice President has not been without challenges. She has faced criticism from both progressives and conservatives, often being in the spotlight for the administration's handling of issues like immigration and economic recovery. Despite the challenges, Kamala has remained resolute, balancing her role as a historic leader with her ongoing advocacy for justice, equality, and progress. Legacy and impact. Kamala Harris's life story is one of resilience, ambition, and breaking barriers. She has consistently worked to make the world a more just place, whether through her work as a prosecutor, her service as California's Attorney General, her tenure in the Senate, or her role as Vice President. She embodies the belief that politics is not just about power, but about creating real change in the lives of ordinary people. Her journey reflects the challenges and triumphs of being a woman of color in a field often dominated by men, and her continued rise is a testament to the evolving landscape of American politics. Kamala Harris has become a symbol of possibility for countless young people across the world, showing that no dream is too big, no barrier too high, and no voice too small. Her legacy is still unfolding, but one thing is clear. Kamala Harris is not just shaping the future of American politics, she is defining it. This story is a brief overview of Kamala Harris's life and political career. Her journey is one of overcoming adversity and blazing trails for those who come after her, and her impact will undoubtedly be felt for generations to come. Forto Mini, you said more. ChatGPT said ChatGPT, certainly. Here's a more detailed look at Kamala Harris's life, tracing key moments in her personal and political journey and how they contributed to her groundbreaking rise in American politics. Early life and family background. Kamala Harris's story begins in Oakland, California, where she was born to Shyamala Gopalan and Donald Harris. Shyamala, an Indian-born cancer researcher, had a powerful influence on Kamala's life, instilling in her a sense of independence and a drive for justice. Kamala's father, Donald Harris, is a Jamaican economist who was born and raised in the Caribbean. His intellectual and academic approach to life inspired Kamala's passion for learning and inquiry. Both of Kamala's parents were civil rights activists who believed in the power of education as a force for social change. Shyamala took her young daughters, Kamala and her sister Maya, to protests and marches, making them keenly aware of issues like racial injustice, economic inequality, and the importance of fighting for marginalized communities. Kamala would later reflect on how her mother's influence taught her to be bold, resilient, and unafraid to speak out against injustice. Her parents separated when she was young, and Kamala and her sister grew up in a mixed cultural environment. They spent much of their time with their mother in the United States, but Kamala also visited family in India, which allowed her to connect with her South Asian roots. Education and early career. Kamala attended Howard University, a historically black university in Washington, D.C., which was a formative experience for her. At Howard, she immersed herself in the rich political culture of the university, where she was exposed to a legacy of Black intellectual thought and activism. She became involved in student government and worked on social justice initiatives, which helped solidify her commitment to public service. It was at Howard that Kamala began to identify deeply with the African American community, even though she also embraced her South Asian heritage. This intersection of identities would become a hallmark of her public life. After graduating from Howard University in 1986 with a degree in political science and economics, Kamala moved back to California to attend UC Hastings College of the Law. At law school, she honed her skills as a litigator and became passionate about using her legal education to fight for justice. She took internships in a variety of legal settings, but she was particularly drawn to work in the district attorney's office. Kamala's time in law school reinforced her belief in the power of the law as a tool for social change, setting her on the path to becoming a prosecutor. Early legal career and advocacy. After passing the bar exam, Kamala Harris began her legal career as a deputy district attorney in San Francisco. During her time as a prosecutor, she worked on a range of criminal cases, focusing on areas such as sexual assault and domestic violence. In her early career, she quickly became known for her toughness and her commitment to seeking justice for victims, even as she navigated the complexities of a legal system that often disadvantaged people of color and women. She was particularly focused on reforming how sexual assault cases were handled, ensuring that victims were treated with dignity and that cases were prosecuted vigorously. Kamala's work as a prosecutor brought her national attention, especially as she sought to create policies to divert young people from the criminal justice system through rehabilitation programs. She also advocated for restorative justice measures, believing that breaking the cycle of incarceration was essential for long-term social change. District Attorney of San Francisco. In 2004, Kamala Harris ran for District Attorney of San Francisco and won, becoming the first woman and the first woman of color to hold that office. In this role, Kamala pushed for innovative programs that aimed to reduce recidivism, such as alternative sentencing programs that helped keep nonviolent offenders out of prison. One of her key initiatives was the establishment of a juvenile diversion program aimed at addressing the root causes of youth crime, including poverty, trauma, and lack of access to education. Kamala's focus was not just on prosecuting crimes, but also on preventing them through a broader vision of social justice. She continued to take a strong stance on issues like police misconduct and worked to implement reforms aimed at increasing transparency and accountability within law enforcement. Attorney General of California. In 2010, Kamala ran for California Attorney General, a position that gave her even more power to shape state policies on criminal justice, healthcare, and consumer protection. As Attorney General, Kamala continued her work on criminal justice reform, but also focused on other key areas, including protecting California's environment and consumer rights. Her tenure was marked by a commitment to civil rights, including her vigorous defense of marriage equality before the U.S. Supreme Court and her opposition to the death penalty. Kamala also took on powerful corporations when it came to holding them accountable for fraudulent practices. In 2012, she helped broker a $25 billion settlement with the nation's 5 largest banks over improper foreclosure practices. This settlement helped thousands of California homeowners avoid foreclosure during the housing crisis. U.S. Senate, breaking national barriers. In 2016, Kamala Harris made another historic move when she ran for U.S. Senate. Her victory was significant, not just because of her policy platform, but because she became the first South Asian American and second Black woman ever elected to the Senate. In the Senate, Kamala's reputation as a fierce interrogator and advocate for social justice quickly grew. As a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, she gained national attention for her questioning of Brett Kavanaugh during his Supreme Court confirmation hearings in 2018. Her incisive questioning and ability to bring clarity to complex legal issues made her a rising star in the Democratic Party. Kamala's time in the Senate was also marked by her advocacy for Medicare for all, climate change action, and criminal justice reform. She co-sponsored the Justice in Policing Act to address systemic racism within law enforcement and worked on legislation to strengthen voting rights. 2020 Presidential Campaign. In 2019, Kamala announced her candidacy for the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination. She ran on a progressive platform that emphasized healthcare reform, climate action, and criminal justice reform. She also positioned herself as a champion for working families, particularly women and people of color. Though her campaign initially gained strong momentum, Kamala struggled to break through in a crowded field of candidates. She faced challenges with messaging and struggled to win over some voters, particularly as other candidates like Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren gained traction. Kamala ended her presidential campaign in December 2019, but her impact on the race was far from over. Historic vice presidential candidacy. In the summer of 2020, after the Democratic National Convention, former Vice President Joe Biden selected Kamala Harris as his running mate. This decision was historic, as Kamala became the first woman, the first black woman, and the first person of South Asian descent to run on a major party's presidential ticket. The Biden-Harris ticket won the 2020 presidential election, securing victory over incumbent Donald Trump and his running mate Mike Pence. Kamala Harris was inaugurated as vice president on January 20, 2021, in a ceremony that marked the first time a woman held the second highest office in the U.S. government. It was a moment of celebration, not just for Kamala, but for millions of people across the country who saw themselves reflected in her story. Vice Presidency, a historic role and focus on key issues. As Vice President, Kamala has broken new ground both symbolically and practically. She's focused on issues such as voting rights, immigration reform, racial justice, and global diplomacy. Her work has included efforts to strengthen democratic institutions and safeguard elections, address the root causes of migration from Central America, and represent the U.S. at summits with world leaders. Kamala's leadership is also essential to the Biden administration's efforts to deal with the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, ensuring that relief and recovery efforts are reaching the most vulnerable communities. In 2021, she took on the task of addressing the immigration crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border and working with international partners to improve conditions in Central America. Kamala Harris's legacy. Kamala Harris's legacy is still unfolding, but she has already become an icon for women, people of color, and anyone who has ever dreamed of breaking barriers in public life. Her life and career embody the notion that public service is about more than just holding power. It's about using that power to create real, lasting change. As Vice President, Kamala Harris represents the future of the United States, one that is more diverse, more inclusive, and more committed to the principles of justice and equality. Her rise to the second highest office in the land is a testament to the resilience and determination of women and marginalized communities, and it is an inspiration to future generations of leaders. ChatGPT said, ChatGPT. Absolutely. Let's continue to dive deeper into Kamala Harris's personal life, her specific policy initiatives, and the broader cultural and political impact of her career. Kamala Harris, a family of immigrants and activists. One of the key elements of Kamala Harris's personal narrative is her upbringing in a family that valued both intellectual rigor and activism. Her mother, Shyamala Gopalan, a cancer researcher originally from Chennai, India, was the guiding force behind much of Kamala's early life. Shyamala, who moved to the U.S. to pursue her PhD at the University of California, Berkeley, was deeply committed to social justice and believed in the transformative power of education. Kamala often recounts how her mother's refusal to let her see herself as anything less than capable shaped her ambition and sense of self-worth. Kamala's father, Donald Harris, an economist who grew up in Jamaica, also shaped her worldview. Though her parents separated when Kamala was young, she spent summers with her father in Jamaica. Kamala credits both of her parents with fostering in her a sense of justice and fairness, which led her to become a lawyer and later a public servant. Her mixed cultural identity, growing up as the daughter of an Indian mother and a Jamaican father, has been central to how she navigates the world and informs her political views. Kamala has often spoken about how this blend of cultures made her feel like an outsider in her own country at times, yet also gave her a unique perspective on issues of race, class, and immigration. Kamala's personal life: a partner and a stepmother. Kamala Harris's personal life has also captured the public's attention. In 2014, Kamala married Douglas Emhoff, a lawyer from California. Emhoff, who became the first second gentleman of the United States when Harris was elected vice president, has been a steady source of support throughout her political career. Emhoff is known for his affable nature and for being an advocate for the arts and for public service. He has frequently spoken about how proud he is of his wife's achievements and the significance of her role as vice president. Douglas Emhoff also brings his own family into the mix. He has 2 children from his previous marriage, Ella and Cole, whom Kamala has embraced as her own. The Harris-Emhoff family dynamic has often been highlighted as a refreshing example of a blended family at the highest levels of American politics. Kamala has referred to her stepchildren as "my kids," and has mentioned how much she loves spending time with them, both in their professional lives and during personal moments. Kamala's relationship with her family members and her role as a stepmother also demonstrate another facet of her leadership, one that embraces family and community, creating a model of inclusivity for future generations. Kamala's policy focuses and legislative work. From her early days as a prosecutor to her current role as vice president, Kamala Harris has had a consistent policy focus on criminal justice reform, racial justice, immigration, and economic inequality. Here's a more in-depth look at some of her key initiatives and legislative work. 1. Criminal justice reform. Throughout her career, Kamala Harris has worked to challenge and reform the criminal justice system. As District Attorney of San Francisco and then as California's Attorney General, Kamala focused on tackling systemic issues like mass incarceration, racial profiling, and police brutality. Her approach often combined tough-on-crime policies with an emphasis on restorative justice, seeking to offer rehabilitation, not just punishment, for many offenders. In the Senate, Kamala co-sponsored bills to end cash bail, a system she viewed as inherently biased against poor and minority communities, and worked to address sentencing disparities, particularly those impacting Black and Latino Americans. She also pushed for greater police accountability and more federal oversight of local law enforcement practices. As vice president, Harris has continued to advocate for comprehensive police reform. She has been a vocal supporter of the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, which aims to ban chokeholds, eliminate qualified immunity for officers, and create a national registry of police misconduct. 2. Healthcare and economic justice. Kamala Harris has been a strong advocate for expanding access to health care and fighting for economic equality. During her presidential campaign in 2020, she championed the idea of Medicare for all, which would create a single-payer healthcare system that provides universal health coverage. While she modified her position later, focusing on improving the Affordable Care Act, ACA, Harris's efforts in the Senate were crucial in keeping healthcare access front and center in American politics. Additionally, she has consistently advocated for policies aimed at lifting up working-class Americans. This includes pushing for higher wages, expanding paid family leave, and advocating for affordable housing. As vice president, she's been a key voice in Biden's economic recovery plans, which include investing in infrastructure and clean energy jobs. 3. Immigration reform. One of the key areas where Kamala has taken a strong leadership position is in immigration reform. Growing up in a family of immigrants, Kamala has often spoken about her personal connection to the issue. As California Attorney General, she was a staunch advocate for DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, supporting protections for undocumented immigrants brought to the U.S. as children. She's been a vocal critic of the Trump administration's immigration policies, especially the family separation policies at the border. As Vice President, she has taken on the role of leading efforts to address the root causes of migration from Central America. This includes working with regional leaders on economic development, addressing violence, and supporting anti-corruption efforts in the region. Harris has also pushed for more humane treatment of asylum seekers and refugees. 4. Voting rights and democracy. Protection. Kamala has long fought for voting rights, a struggle that gained even more urgency after the 2020 election. As the U.S. Senate became increasingly divided over voter suppression laws, Kamala emerged as a leading voice in advocating for a federal voting rights law to counteract restrictive state laws aimed at disenfranchising minority voters. In her role as Vice President, Kamala has been actively working to push for legislative reforms in the face of increasing efforts to limit voting rights, a battle that she sees as essential to safeguarding American democracy. Kamala's advocacy for electoral reform is connected to her belief that democracy should be an inclusive process where every eligible citizen has a voice. Her position on the issue has led to public clashes with Republican lawmakers and conservative-leaning state governments, which have sought to limit access to voting through various legislative tactics. Cultural and political impact. Kamala Harris's rise to vice president has had a profound cultural impact, especially in terms of representation. She is the first woman, the first black woman, and the first South Asian American to hold this office, marking a milestone not only in American history, but also for women and people of color everywhere. Kamala's ascendancy to the second highest office in the land has been a beacon of possibility for countless young girls, women, and people from marginalized communities. Kamala's visibility is particularly significant in a country that has historically marginalized women and people of color in positions of power. Her election as vice president sent a message to the world that the highest political office in the United States is now more reflective of the country's diversity than ever before. Beyond her identity, Kamala represents a new era in American politics, one that is less about traditional political dynasties and more about a growing, diverse coalition of voices calling for reform. Her leadership style, rooted in empathy, pragmatism, and a commitment to justice, stands in contrast to the more combative, top-down leadership styles of previous political figures. Her legacy will likely be seen not just in her policy wins, but in how she has broken down barriers for women and people of color in American politics. She is, in many ways, a living embodiment of the idea that leadership should reflect the society it serves. Kamala Harris, a legacy in the making. Kamala Harris's political journey is far from over. She is still in the midst of her term as vice president, and many of her key policy priorities on healthcare, economic recovery, criminal justice, and voting rights are ongoing battles. But no matter where her career takes her, Kamala's impact on the political landscape is undeniable. She has redefined what it means to be a leader in the 21st century, paving the way for future generations of women, people of color, and public servants who will follow in her footsteps. Her story is one of resilience, trailblazing, and empowerment. And as she continues her work in the Biden administration, her voice remains a powerful force in shaping the future of America.